Before we continue the story, I need to take you back. Not to where we left off. Further back than that. 6 months before the Georgia Tech acceptance letter. 6 months before the scholarship. 6 months before any of what's coming. I need to take you to a Tuesday night in August. The kitchen table. You know the one. The same table where Diane told a 9-year-old boy the truth about his father. The same table where a 14-year-old sat in the dark after finding a letter that called him the child. The same table where a mother reached across the wood grain and put her hand over her son's and told him his name meant something. That table has held more of this family's history than any piece of furniture should have to. Tonight it holds Devian, 18 years old. Bags half-packed by the front door. Acceptance letter on the refrigerator, held up by a magnet shaped like the Eiffel Tower that Diane bought years ago from a dollar store because she'd always wanted to go to Paris, and back then that magnet was the closest thing she had to a promise. The apartment is quiet. Diane is asleep. She pulled a double shift today, came home with her shoes already off at the door, ate half a plate of food standing at the counter, and was in bed before 10. Devian watched her do it with the particular ache of someone who has been watching their mother carry too much for too long. He should be asleep too. He's not. He opens his laptop. Not to study. Not to review orientation materials. Not to do anything practical or productive or forward-moving. He types his own name into the search bar. Devian Holloway. He presses enter. The results come back thin and scattered. A LinkedIn profile he made last year that says almost nothing. A mention in his high school honor roll list from junior year. A photograph from a robotics competition in 10th grade where he is standing at the edge of the frame, half out of the shot. A whole person barely visible. He sits with that for a moment. The blankness of it. The strange, clean emptiness of a name that hasn't done anything yet. A name that the world hasn't needed to know. Then, because he is who he is, and because some habits live deeper than intention, his fingers move before he tells them to. He types, Park Min-jun. He presses enter. 12 pages. Articles. Profiles. Business features. Conference appearances. A Forbes Asia mention. A photograph from a Seoul charity gala where the man stands with his wife, Ji-yeon, both of them composed and polished and completely at ease in the kind of room that is designed to confirm how far you've come. 12 pages of a life that chose itself over everything else. Devian looks at the screen for a long time. Then he closes the laptop. He doesn't slam it. He doesn't cry. He doesn't sit in anger or spiral into the place that used to pull at him when he thought about this man too long. He just closes it. Quietly. Gets up. Drinks a glass of water standing at the sink. Looking out the window at the brick wall that has faced this apartment for his entire life. Then he goes to bed. And somewhere in the space between awake and asleep, in that blurry honest place where you can't pretend to yourself, he makes a decision. Not a loud one. Not the kind you announce. Just a quiet, bone-deep, irrevocable decision. One day, someone is going to type Devian Holloway into a search bar, and the results are going to come back different. He closes his eyes. Morning comes. He goes to Georgia Tech. Georgia Tech's campus sits in Midtown Atlanta like a city inside a city. Glass buildings and engineering quads and the particular energy of people who are there to build things, not just learn about them. Devian arrives with one bag, a laptop 2 years older than most of his classmates, and the specific alertness of someone who grew up understanding that no room is ever truly free. His honors business cohort is 43 students. He counts, on the first day, 6 black students, including himself. He doesn't say anything about this. He just notes it, files it, and moves on because this is something he has been doing his entire life. Reading rooms. Understanding quickly where he fits and where he doesn't and deciding not to let either one slow him down. But he also notices something else on that first day. The particular ease of the students around him. Not arrogance. Most of them aren't arrogant. Just ease. The settled, unbothered ease of people who have been told their whole lives that rooms like this were built for them. Who have parents who walked these same kinds of hallways. Who have never had to do the mental arithmetic of wondering whether they deserve to be here. Devian has done that arithmetic every single day of his life. And here is the thing about that, the thing that he will not understand until later, not fully, not in words. that arithmetic, painful as it is also a kind of training. It makes you precise. It makes you unsentimentally clear-eyed about what is real and what is performance. It makes you very, very hard to fool. He is not the most connected student in the room. He is not the most resourced. But by the end of the first semester, he is the most prepared. Every time. For everything. He reads the assigned material and then reads the books the assigned material is responding to. He studies case studies and then traces the companies forward in time to see what happened next, what the textbook didn't include, what got left out of the clean version of history. He asks questions in class that make professors pause, not showing off, just genuinely needing to know. His academic advisor tells him at the end of freshman year that he is one of the sharpest students she has worked with in 15 years. Devian nods politely, goes home, calls his mother. She says, "I know." He laughs. She says, "I've always known. I was just waiting for everyone else to catch up." He meets Claude in the second week of freshman year. It is not a dramatic meeting. There is no moment of recognition, no instant click, no cinematic collision. It is just two young men sitting across from each other in the dining hall because every other seat was taken, eating food that is technically edible and not much more than that, and Claude looks at Devian across the table and says, without preamble, the way some people lead with the truth before they've even decided to be friends. You carry yourself like someone who already lost something. That's either going to destroy you or make you dangerous. Devian looks up from his food, looks at this person, this slightly too perceptive Nigerian-American pre-law student who apparently has no concept of easing into a conversation, and says, "Dangerous." Claude nods slowly, like this is the right answer and he'd been waiting to see if Devian knew it. "Good," he says, and goes back to eating. That is the beginning. Over the next 4 years, Claude becomes the person Devian calls when he doesn't know what to do. Not because Claude always has answers, he doesn't. But because Claude is constitutionally incapable of letting Devian be dishonest with himself, which turns out to be exactly the kind of friend a person with Devian's particular history needs most. He is the first person outside of Diane who knows the whole story. The TV, the letter, the word, the child, Seoul, the building in Gangnam that Devian stood in front of for exactly 4 minutes before walking away. Claude listens to all of it one night sophomore year, sitting on the floor of Devian's dorm room at midnight, and when Devian finishes he is quiet for a long time. Then he says, "The fact that you're not bitter is either the healthiest thing I've ever seen or the most dangerous form of suppression I've ever witnessed. I genuinely don't know which one yet." Devian thinks about it. "Me neither," he says honestly. Claude points at him. That honesty right there. That's going to save you." Junior year arrives with the particular velocity of a year that matters. Devian is 20 years old. He has declared his concentration international business strategy, with a focus on cross-cultural market entry. His professors know his name now, not because he performs for them but because his work consistently goes further than the assignment required. There is a quality to his thinking that is hard to describe but easy to recognize, a kind of double vision, the ability to see a market or a system or a negotiation from two angles simultaneously, as if he has always been standing between two worlds and learned to use the vantage point. He just hasn't fully named it yet. In October of junior year, a new name appears on the course listings.
Erhan Sui Eun.
Visiting faculty, Yonsei University, Seoul. Seminar, Asian Market Entry Strategy, Cultural Intelligence and Corporate Negotiation. Devian registers for it within 20 minutes of the listing going live. Not because of the professor, because of the subject matter, because of what he has been quietly building toward for 3 years. The seminar is small, 12 students, seminar table, the kind of class where there is nowhere to hide and no percentage in trying. Dr. Han Suyun arrives on the first day exactly on time, sets her materials on the table without theatrics, looks around the room at each student with the particular directness of someone who has been doing this long enough to see through everything that isn't real, and begins. She is in her mid-50s, precise. Her English is exact in the way of someone who learned it as a serious instrument rather than a casual one. She has, Devian notes immediately, no patience for anything that is not substance. On that first day, 15 minutes into a discussion about a Korean technology company's failed expansion into the American Midwest, she stops mid-sentence. Looks directly at Devian. Cold call. No warning. You. Tell me what they did wrong. The room shifts slightly. 11 other students wait. Devian doesn't hesitate. He answers. In Korean. Not perfectly, his grammar in spoken Korean still carries the traces of someone self-taught, the slight formality of a person who learned from books and apps and one immersive summer rather than from a childhood. But fluently, substantively, in Korean that understands not just the words but the register, the particular way Korean corporate communication operates, the hierarchies embedded in language, the things that get said sideways rather than directly in why. The room goes completely silent. Dr. Han looks at him. A long moment passes. Where did you learn that? Myself, he says. And 6 weeks in Mapo. Something moves through her expression. Not warmth, she is not a warm person in the easy sense of the word. More like recalibration. The way a very good scientist looks when a result comes back different from the expected outcome, and they realize the experiment is more interesting than they thought. Stay after, she says, and goes back to the seminar as if nothing happened. After the other students leave, Dr. Han sits across the table from Devian and asks him 3 questions. The first is about his Korean, how he learned it, how long, what his relationship to the language is. He tells her. Duolingo streak. Cultural festival. Soul exchange. The grandmother in Mapo who said something he has never forgotten. She listens without interrupting. The second question is about his academic background, where he grew up, what his concentration is, what he is building toward. He tells her that too. Atlanta. International business. The specific intersection of Korean and American markets. She nods. The third question she asks differently from the first 2. She sits back slightly. Her tone shifts, not softer, but more considered. Why Korea specifically? Of all the markets you could have chosen. Devian is quiet for a moment. He has answered versions of this question before. The cultural festival answer. The Duolingo answer. The Seoul answer. All of them true and none of them complete. He looks at Dr. Han, this woman who has no patience for performance and immediate respect for substance, and he decides to give her the complete version. My father is Korean, he says. He left before I was born. I came to the culture on my own. And somewhere along the way I realized I understood it from the inside in a way that most people who look like me don't, and in a way that most people who share my father's background never had to earn. I'm not sure what to do with that yet, but I know it's something. Dr. Han looks at him for a long time. Then she says, you understand 2 markets, 2 cultures, 2 ways of building trust, 2 corporate psychologies, from the inside. Not academically. Lived. Do you have any idea how rare that is? Do you understand what you are actually sitting on? Devian has never thought about himself as rare. He has spent his entire life thinking about himself as incomplete, as the product of a subtraction, as someone defined by what was taken rather than what remained. No, he says honestly.
DR. Han notes.
Then that, she says, is what this semester is for. She becomes his mentor in the way that the best mentors do, not by holding his hand but by refusing to let him shrink. She assigns him additional reading, challenges his analysis in class with a rigor she doesn't apply to the other students, not to be cruel but because she can see that he is capable of more and has no interest in watching capable people coast. She writes him a recommendation letter at the end of the semester that he will not read until years later, when it surfaces in a box of old papers, and when he reads it he will have to sit down. But that is later. For now, what she gives him is something simpler and more valuable than any letter. She gives him the word for what he is. Not biracial. Not mixed. Not caught between. A bridge. Someone who was built by circumstance, by loss, by his own stubborn refusal to let what was taken from him define the borders of what he could become, to stand between 2 worlds and make them legible to each other. The world is full of people who understand one thing deeply, she tells him near the end of the semester, over coffee in her office. What it needs, and what it is almost never given, is people who understand 2 things deeply and can move between them without losing either. That is not a consolation prize for your history, Devian. That is your actual gift. The question is whether you are going to use it or spend the rest of your life grieving the story you didn't get. He thinks about that for a long time. He is still thinking about it 3 weeks later when he goes home for winter break and walks into a barbershop on a Tuesday afternoon. Mr. Curtis has been cutting hair on the same block in southwest Atlanta for 27 years. He has cut Devian's hair since Devian was 8 years old. Since Diane first brought him in with his small serious face and his 2 big ears and his particular habit of sitting completely still in the chair, which Mr. Curtis remarked on approvingly because most 8-year-olds squirm. Devian has never squirmed. He sits in the chair on this Tuesday in December. 20 years old, home for winter break, the semester's worth of Dr. Han's voice still moving through his head, and watches his own face in the mirror as Mr. Curtis works. The shop smells the same as it always has. Clippers and product and the particular warmth of a room that has held a lot of men's quiet moments. The TV in the corner plays a basketball game nobody is watching. 2 older men play dominoes at the table near the window. The radio competes with the TV. Mr. Curtis is talking. He is always talking, the kind of barber who maintains a running commentary on the neighborhood, the news, whoever came in before you, and Devian is half listening in the comfortable way you half listen to someone you've known your whole life. And then Mr. Curtis pauses, tilts his head, looks at Devian in the mirror with the particular assessment of a man who has watched a boy grow up one haircut at a time. "You look more like your daddy every year," he says, casually, like a compliment, like he doesn't know because Diane never said, because the neighborhood only ever knew the shape of the absence and not the details inside it, that Devian has never met his father, has never been in the same room as his father, has never heard his father's voice outside of a television broadcast. Devian does not correct him. He smiles slightly, says nothing, lets the conversation move on to something else. But in the mirror, his own eyes look back at him. And he sees it, really sees it. For the first time since he was 9 years old, standing in a different bathroom mirror, tracing the outer corners of his eyes with one fingertip, he allows himself to look at his own face without bracing. His mother's cheekbones, strong, pronounced, the architecture of a woman who has held herself together through things that would have broken other people. Her full mouth, her color warm and deep, her forehead, and the eyes, always the eyes, the slight elongation at the outer corners, the particular way they sit in his face, holding expression quietly, waiting, patient in a way the rest of his face sometimes isn't. Eyes that are unmistakably both things at once. Eyes that cannot pretend to be only one. He is both. He has always been both. And for 20 years, through the cultural festival and the Duolingo streak and Seoul and the grandmother and Dr. Han and all of it, he has been doing something he never had a word for until right now, sitting in Mr. Curtis's chair on a Tuesday in December. He has been claiming the Korean half, reaching for the culture, the language, the history, the food, the city, the people, but never quite saying, "This is mine," never fully meaning it. Because somewhere very deep, in a place that logic and intention couldn't quite reach, claiming the Korean half felt like it required something from the man who gave it to him. Like you couldn't take the inheritance without acknowledging the one who was supposed to hand it over. Like you couldn't own the culture without somehow making peace with the person who withheld the connection to it. Like claiming Korea was the same as forgiving his father. And he was not ready to forgive his father. So he held the Korean half at arm's length. Close enough to study, far enough to deny. Mr. Curtis finishes, hands him the mirror. Devian looks at the back of his head, nods, says looks good, hands back the mirror.
B.
Tips, says goodbye, walks out into the December Atlanta afternoon, and stands on the sidewalk for a moment with the particular stillness of someone who has just understood something they cannot ununderstand. He goes home, goes to his childhood bedroom, the same room, the same walls, though the decorations have changed over the years, the bones of it are exactly what they have always been. Sits on the edge of his bed, and does the work, the real work, the quiet interior work that nobody sees and nobody can do for you. He separates the two things completely. His father is one thing. The choices his father made, the phone call, the return to Seoul, the blank on the form, the letter, the television, the words "my only son," those belong to Park Min-jun entirely. They are his to carry. They always were. But Korea is another thing. The language that came alive in his chest in front of a calligraphy demonstration. The city that felt like arriving somewhere he had a right to be. The grandmother who set down her chopsticks. The food that tasted like something his body recognized from a depth that had nothing to do with memory and everything to do with inheritance. The eyes in the mirror. None of that belongs to his father's choices. All of that belongs to him. It was always his. He just kept waiting for someone to give him permission to claim it. And that someone was never coming. Because the only person who could give that permission was him. He picks up his phone. Opens his messages. Finds Jiho's name, the last message between them 8 months old. Some joke about Norbang that Devian had never responded to because life got fast and time moved and somehow 8 months passed. He types, "I think I finally figured something out." He sends it. 3 seconds pass. "Only took you forever," face with tears of joy. What took so long? Devian reads it and laughs. Not a polite laugh. Not the controlled, measured expression that passes for amusement in public. A real one, surprised out of him, rising up from somewhere genuine. From the kitchen, Diane hears it. She doesn't know what it's about. She doesn't ask. She just smiles, standing at the stove, and keeps cooking. Because that laugh, loose and real and unbothered, is a sound she has not heard from her son in a very long time. And she recognizes it for exactly what it is. Her boy putting something down. Before we go further, I want to say something directly to those of you who left comments after part 1 asking about this. A lot of you wanted to know whether Devian would ever truly embrace both sides of who he is. Not just his mother's side, the strength, the sacrifice, the Atlanta kitchen table. But the Korean side too. The part that came from a man who left. You were asking the right question. And I want you to know, this story heard you. Because this is the thing about identity that nobody tells you. You don't have to forgive someone to claim what they passed down. The culture, the language, the eyes in the mirror, those were never his father's to withhold. They were always Devian's. He just had to separate the gift from the person who failed to give it properly. That's what this part of his story is about. Now let's keep going. Senior year of college moves the way senior years do when you are building something. Fast and dense and full of the particular pressure of knowing the scaffolding is about to come down and whatever you've constructed underneath it is going to have to stand on its own. Devian's thesis is a 60-page analysis of the specific cultural friction points in Korean-American business partnerships, why they fail, where the misunderstandings lie, what a company needs to understand about hierarchy, communication, trust building, and face before it can operate effectively in both spaces. His thesis committee calls it one of the best they have reviewed in a decade. Dr. Han reads it and sends him a single line by email. "This is the beginning of your company. Don't let anyone talk you out of it." He doesn't. He graduates in May. Full ride, honors track, and a handshake from the dean that he photographs for Diane because she couldn't get off work to attend the ceremony. And he does not hold that against her for even 1 second because she has been attending every ceremony of his life in the only way she could, by making the next one possible. That evening, he sits at the kitchen table. Their kitchen table, always this kitchen table. With his diploma between them and a dinner Diane made from scratch despite a full day of work. And she looks at him across the plates and says, "Your grandmother would have loved to see this." Devian's great-grandmother. The woman who raised Diane in Decatur with 5 cousins in a 3-bedroom house. He never met her. She died the year he was born. "Tell me about her," he says. And Diane does. For 2 hours they sit at the kitchen table and Diane tells him stories he has never heard before. About a woman who worked other people's houses and came home and worked her own and never once stopped believing that the next generation would have a different life. A woman who couldn't afford softness but kept a particular kind of fierce love burning in every room she occupied. Devian listens to every word. At the end, he says, "She sounds like you." Diane waves her hand dismissively, but her eyes are bright. "She was better than me," she says. "All our mothers are better than us." That's the whole point. He starts his company 3 months after graduation. Holloway Bridge Consulting. The name is deliberate. He thought about it for 2 weeks before committing to it and then felt certain in the way you feel certain when you've stopped performing for other people's expectations and started building for your own. A bridge. That's what Dr. Han called him. That's what he is. The company does exactly what Devian described in his thesis. It helps American companies understand Korean corporate culture deeply enough to build real partnerships, and it helps Korean companies entering the American market understand what trust looks like over here, how decisions get made, where the invisible lines are. It is niche and specific and built on something that cannot be faked or manufactured. It requires someone who lives in both worlds, who inherited both sets of instincts, who paid a price to understand something that most people never have to think about. It is, in the most precise sense, the company that could only be built by Devian. The first year is lean. Lean in the way that makes you question everything, not because the work isn't good but because the world is slow to understand what it needs and fast to doubt what it hasn't seen before. He works from a rented room with a whiteboard and 2 second-hand chairs. He makes his own coffee. He takes calls from clients who are interested but not yet ready, who ask good questions and then go quiet for 3 weeks and then come back having already made a decision without him. He keeps going. Khalad, now in his first year of law school, calls him every 2 weeks with the same question. You still standing? Still standing, Devian always says. Good. Sit down when you're dead. He calls his mother every Sunday. She has moved up at work. She is managing her department now, a title she did not ask for but accepted because the salary difference was significant, and she is a practical woman who understands that dignity and pragmatism are not opposites. She is good at it. Her staff respects her with the particular respect that people reserve for someone who clearly knows what they are doing and never makes them feel small for not knowing it yet. She took the Paris trip in March. Devian did not find out until she was already there. She booked it herself, quietly, the way she does most things, without announcement. She sent him the first photo at 7 a.m. Atlanta time, which was 1 p.m. Paris time, and the photo was of a croissant and a café au lait at a table on the Seine, and the caption said simply, "Finally." He stared at that photo for a long time. Then he texted back, "You deserve every single bite." She sent 39 more photos over the next 4 days. Every single one was food. He framed the one of the creme brulee and hung it above his desk. Comes on a Wednesday. Devian is at his desk, the same rented room, though he has added a second whiteboard now and replaced one of the second-hand chairs with something that doesn't hurt his back. Reviewing a proposal for a mid-sized Atlanta logistics company that wants to expand into the South Korean distribution market. His email notification appears at 11:47 a.m. The sender is a name he doesn't recognize. David Shin, Business Development, Park Global Technologies, America's Division. He reads the subject line, Partnership Inquiry, Cultural Strategy Consulting. He reads it again. He is very still. Not frozen. Not panicking. Just very, very still in the way that the body goes when the mind is doing something important and needs the body to not distract it. Park Global Technologies. He opens the email. It is professional and direct, the kind of email a competent business development person sends when they have done their research and identified a specific need and found the specific person who might fill it. David Shin explains that Park Global is expanding its Atlanta operations significantly over the next 18 months and is looking for a consulting partner who can help their soul-based executive team navigate American corporate culture and relationship building, particularly in the Southeast market. They found Holloway Bridge Consulting through an industry directory. They are not reaching out because of who Devian is. They have no idea who Devian is. They are reaching out because of what he built. He reads the email 3 times. Then he puts his phone down, walks to the window, looks out at the street below. Atlanta, his city, his mother's city. The city where he was born during a rainstorm that knocked out 3 city blocks and where nobody put a name on the father's line of his birth record. He picks up his phone, calls Khalad. 1 ring. Talk to me. Park Global Technologies just emailed me, Devian says. Silence. It is a specific kind of silence, the kind where the other person is doing rapid calculations. What kind of email? Business. Partnership inquiry. They found me through a directory. David Shin, Business Development. They don't know who I am. More silence. Then, carefully, do you want them to? Devian looks out the window. At the city. At his reflection faint in the glass. At the Atlanta skyline he has looked at his entire life. Not yet, he says. Not like this. Okay, Khalad says. Then how? Like a professional, Devian says. I respond like a professional. I take the meeting like a professional. I do the work like a professional. Because that's what I am. Dev. Yeah. Are you sure about this? He thinks about his mother at the kitchen table. About Dr. Han's office. About the grandmother in Mapo who set down her chopsticks. About a glass building in Gangnam that he stood in front of for 4 minutes and then walked away from because he wasn't ready. I'm sure, he says. He hangs up, sits back down at his desk, opens a reply to David Shin, and writes back. The call is 3 days later. Devian prepares for it the way he prepares for everything, not just thoroughly but completely, in a way that goes several layers deeper than the surface of what is being asked. He reviews Park Global's public filings, their American expansion timeline, their existing Atlanta office structure, the cultural friction points their sole executives are most likely encountering, the specific communication gaps that tend to emerge when Korean corporate hierarchy meets American flat structure expectations. He prepares an analysis so precise that it anticipates questions they haven't asked yet and offers frameworks they didn't know they needed. When the call begins, David Shin is professionally warm in the way of someone who expects a good conversation but not a remarkable one. By the 20-minute mark, the tone has shifted. Devian speaks about Korean corporate culture with the fluency of someone who didn't study it but grew up adjacent to it. He explains the particular weight of nunchi, the Korean art of reading a room, understanding what is not said, sensing what is needed without being told, and how the absence of that skill in American business partners consistently undermines even well-intentioned Korean-American partnerships. He explains hierarchy and how it functions not as rigidity but as a form of respect that American informality often accidentally violates. He speaks in Korean twice during the call, briefly, and only to illustrate specific linguistic points about how certain concepts simply do not translate and must be understood in their original form. By the end, David Shin says, "Mr. Holloway, I'm going to be direct with you. You are the most prepared person we have spoken to for this role. By a significant margin." Devian thanks him, says he looks forward to next steps, hangs up, puts the phone face down on the desk, sits in the quiet of his rented office for a long moment. He has just impressed Park Global Technologies. He has just demonstrated to a representative of his father's company that the child who was left behind, the one who didn't get a name on the form, the one who was called the child in a letter that was supposed to be a goodbye, became someone extraordinary. And his father will never know it was him. Not yet. He tells his mother on Sunday. Not the whole thing. Not the part about what this company is and whose name is at the top of the organizational chart. Just the shape of it. A major Korean tech company, expanding in Atlanta, interested in Holloway Bridge for a partnership. Diane listens. She is in her kitchen, Sunday phone call, the background sounds of a woman who has just gotten home from church and is somewhere between the shoes off and the cooking phase of her Sunday afternoon. When he finishes, she is quiet for a moment. "What's the company?" she asks. And there it is. Diane has always been precise in the particular way of someone who has been lied to by omission before and developed a finely calibrated sensor for the pause before an answer. "Park Global Technologies," he says. The line goes quiet. Not a shocked quiet. More like the quiet of a woman setting down something heavy that she has been expecting to carry again for some time. "Devian. I know." "Does he?"
No.
"They found me through a directory. The email came from a business development manager. It's completely coincidental." Silence. "Is it?" she says. And he doesn't have a good answer for that because he has been asking himself the same question for 3 days. "I don't know," he says. "Maybe not. Maybe when you build something that does what ours does in this city, in this market, maybe it was always going to cross paths with his eventually. Maybe that's just what happens when two things grow in the same direction long enough." She thinks about that. "And you want to proceed?" "I want to work," he says. "I built something real. They need something real. The fact that his name is on the building doesn't change what my work is worth." Diane is quiet for a long time. Then she says, "You built something that his company wants to pay for. Do you understand what that means? He left this city thinking he was protecting a legacy. And you just became part of it anyway, without his permission, without his help, on nobody's terms but your own." Devian doesn't say anything. "Does that bother you?" he asks eventually. "That I'm working with them?" She takes a breath. "The only thing that ever scared me," she says slowly, "was the idea that what he did might stop you, might make you smaller, might become the story you told about yourself forever. It didn't. Nothing did. Not one thing. So no, it doesn't bother me. What it does is make me feel like I can finally breathe all the way out. He hears her voice catch just slightly on that last sentence. Just slightly. He pretends not to notice because she would prefer it that way. Okay, he says softly. Okay, she echoes. I'll call you next Sunday. You better. She hangs up. He sits at his desk for a long time. Outside the window, Atlanta does what Atlanta does. Keeps moving, keeps building, keeps being the city that raised him in a dimly lit apartment with mismatched furniture and a view of a brick wall. He loves this city. He has always loved this city. The formal partnership proposal comes 2 weeks later. It is substantial. A 6-month retainer, quarterly reviews, access to the sole executive team for monthly cultural strategy sessions, plus ad hoc consultation as needed. It is the kind of contract that does not just sustain a small consultancy, it legitimizes one. Devian reviews it with Khalad, who is not a business lawyer but is a law student who reads contracts with the particular intensity of someone who has seen what happens when people don't. This is real, Khalad says, turning a page. Like actually real. This is a company that doesn't do things small. No, Devian says. They don't. Are you going to sign it? There's a kickoff meeting first. In person. Senior leadership from both the Atlanta office and Seoul. Khalad looks up. Seoul leadership is flying in? Yes. Who? Devian looks at him. Khalad understands immediately. He sets the contract down. Dev. I know. Does he know it's you?
No.
When is the meeting? 3 weeks. Khalad leans back. Looks at the ceiling. Does that thing he does when he is processing something too large for a quick response, the stillness, the intake of breath, the long exhale. Okay, he says finally. What do you need from me? Nothing, Devian says. I just needed to say it out loud to someone who already knows the whole story, so I could hear how it sounds. And how does it sound? Devian thinks about it. Like something that was always going to happen, he says. Like a door that's been waiting for me to be ready to walk through it. Are you ready? He thinks about the kitchen table. About 2 a.m. and 12 pages of search results and a quiet decision made in the dark. He thinks about the barbershop mirror and the eyes that are both things at once. He thinks about Diane saying I can finally breathe all the way out. He thinks about standing in front of a glass tower in Gangnam for 4 minutes. Counting the seconds, knowing he wasn't ready, turning around and walking away because walking away was the right move then. Yeah, he says. I think I finally am. The night before the meeting, Devian's apartment is quiet in a way that feels earned. It is a different apartment from the one in part 1 of this story. Slightly larger, slightly higher floor, a window that faces the skyline instead of a brick wall. He moved in 8 months ago. It still doesn't have much furniture. A desk, a bed, a small table with 2 chairs, bookshelves that are actually full, but what it has is intentional. Every object in it is something he chose. On the desk, a calligraphy set, the one he bought at a bookstore in Gangnam while Jiho waited in the travel section. He has never framed any of the pieces he's made with it. They stay in a drawer, private, the ongoing practice of a thing that belongs entirely to him. On the wall above the desk, a photograph. Paris. A creme brulee on a white tablecloth, the edge of the Seine barely visible in the background. Diane's steady hand holding a tiny spoon. On the desk beside the laptop, a notebook, dark cover, his name on the front in his own handwriting. Devian. No last name, just the first. The one that means something. He lays out his suit an hour before bed. Dark navy, not trying to impress, trying to be exact. He reviews his presentation one final time not because he needs to but because he is the kind of person who respects the work enough to look at it one more time before it goes into the world. He charges his laptop, sets his alarm, drinks a glass of water standing at the kitchen window the way he has done since he was a small boy in a different apartment looking at a different view. At 10:47 p.m., he calls his mother. She picks up on the second ring. She always picks up on the second ring. Tomorrow's the day, he says. I know, she says. A comfortable silence stretches between them. The kind that only exists between people who have spent years together in the same silences and learned that they don't need to fill them. How are you feeling? She asks. He thinks about it honestly. Ready, he says. I think I've been ready for longer than I knew. You have, she says simply. You've been ready since you were 14 years old sitting at that kitchen table. You just needed time to catch up to what you already were. He is quiet.
Mama.
Yeah. Thank you. For all of it. For every single piece of it. She makes a soft sound. Not dismissive. She is not a dismissive person. Just the sound of someone receiving something they worked very hard for and are now allowing themselves to fully accept. You're going to be extraordinary tomorrow, she says. You already are. Just go in there and let them see it. I will. Call me after. First thing. Good. Now go to sleep. He smiles. Yes, ma'am. He hangs up. Stands in the middle of his apartment. The calligraphy set. The photograph. The notebook with his name on the cover. Everything he has built. Everything he has claimed. Everything he refused to let be taken. He looks at it all for a moment. Then he turns off the light. Tomorrow morning, Devian Holloway will walk into a conference room. Park Min-joon will be sitting at the other end of the table. A man who built an empire. A man who stood on national television with his hand on another boy's shoulder and spoke 3 words into the morning air without knowing that 30 blocks away, in a dimly lit apartment, a boy in a gray hoodie was watching, absorbing, deciding. That boy is not in the gray hoodie anymore. He has a company. He has a name that 12 pages of search results do not yet capture but will. He has a mother who can finally breathe all the way out and a mentor who called him a bridge and a best friend who told him on the very first day that he was going to be dangerous. He has the eyes that are both things at once. He has earned every inch of the chair he is about to sit in. What happens in that room, what a man sees or doesn't see, recognizes or refuses to, feels or keeps buried under 16 years of a decision he has carried alone. That is part 3. But tonight, the night before, in a small apartment with a skyline view and a notebook with 1 word on the cover, Devian sleeps. He has work to do. And he is ready. If part 2 moved you, you already know what to do. Share it with someone who needs to hear that what was taken from you was never the whole story. And stay close, because part 3 is the room. And the room is everything.